Okay, so we are live now. So before we start, I am really, really grateful that today we have Ayushi Gupta. And I am really happy because I know like we both have been trying for a very long time to do this webinar, but the timing was not working out for me or maybe for you. So that like there were I think after 2 months we are able to do this
Yes,
webinar,
yes.
and maybe after 3 years we are able to talk to each other here face to face, so that's really really great. A lot of people, like people who have joined, I would like to tell you that Ayushi is the first person who introduced me to the counseling psychology, who taught me the ABC of counseling. So thank you so much for that, and you being
Oh
here
no,
really
just
really
being
makes me feel,
generous.
yeah, it really makes me feel proud and happy. So before we go ahead, I would like to introduce you formally to our audience, and also thank you everybody for joining in today. And today we are going to talk about something which is very common, yet we do not know what to do about it, which is overthinking. Like every here and there, you will be able to see, I overthink a lot, or this person overthinks a lot, but what to do about it? So today we are going to talk exactly about that. And today we have, so today's session is being conducted by Ayushi Gupta. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of Inscape Psychology Wellness Studio. She has worked with more than 250 plus clients across different mental health concerns and has extensive experience in therapy as well as psychometric assessment. Her work focuses on creating a safe, grounded space to help individual understand their thoughts and build emotional clarity. So with this, I would like to uh, I would like to invite Ayushi Gupta to take over the presentation for today.
Thank you so much, Aprajita. It's lovely connecting with you always. And thank you so much for that lovely introduction. That was, way over generalized, but thank you for that, right? So, before we start today's session, I would just want all of you who all have joined to just think and reflect on the fact that even before, when we joined this workshop or this webinar, right, there must have been a lot of thoughts in our head, right, about today's schedule, about the week that we have had, about the week that's about to come, escape planning and everything. So our head is always abuzz with a lot of thoughts, right? But sometimes when those thoughts become way too overwhelming, just refuse to die down about one particular topic, that's when, we feel distressed with our own thoughts, right? And that's what we generally called overthinking. And that's why that is what exactly we aim to understand here, right? So, Aprajita, if you could just shift the next slide for me. So this is very basic about me and Inkscape, which Aprajita has already, so generously shared. So I would like to talk very briefly about Inkscape. So the whole idea behind Inkscape was that we often try to find escapes from our own situations, from our own realities, from our own, concerns. Say, I want to go escape on a mountains, or maybe just shut down for a day or two and just have that one day for myself and escape from my world, right? But in that all the hustle, we kind of forget that what we actually need is not an escape, but an inscape, Ki whatever we are seeking does not really lie outside, but it is there within us. So maybe if we try doing escape rather than escape, that might actually, we might end up finding some solution to our problems, right? So that was the whole idea behind, establishing escape. Now, can we have the next slide, Prajita? Yeah, so the goal of today's webinar would primarily be to understand what overthinking is, learn the simple basic science behind why do one overthink, right? What is the logic of the brain behind going into that loop of overthinking? explore how our thoughts, feelings, and actions, are connected with one another, identify what not to do when the mind spirals with overthinking, learn some very practical everyday tools to pause these spirals, and then practice some grounding and relaxation. Maybe, like I can demonstrate some of these tools out here for you so that it becomes easier for you to practice in your time. And then, leave a small action plan for what to do when the mind won't stop thinking. Next. So, what is overthinking actually? So, many of us, I see people around me very casually labeling themselves that, oh, I'm an overthinker. So, I overthink everything left, right, and center, and that's just who I am, right? What do we really mean when we say that we overthink? Because thinking is something that all of us do. Like, that's the basic job of us humans, right? Thoughts होते हैं, we cannot control them. वो आते ही हैं. Then what is it that makes us say that we are overthinker? So basically, I can give some examples. So for example, when we are doing our job and we have to send an email to our superior, right? After sending the mail, technically the job is done, right? So we must not think too deep about it. But what we end up doing is we keep checking and rechecking the email. What if there's some mistake, or what if it just didn't go? What if so there are a lot of what ifs, right? Technically, हमारा job वहीं खत्म हो जाता है the moment we send the email. And of course, because if it's an important email, we must have cross-checked it. But that did not satisfy my mind, right? I again have this compulsion of checking and rechecking कि उसमें कुछ spelling error तो नहीं था, all the information was laid out properly or not. That exactly is overthinking, is when your brain gets stuck in a loop trying to solve any problem with emotional thinking, you know. Now, this is an important part. Key thinking, as I said, is what we do on everyday basis. Every second, we are having some thought or the other. What makes us overthink something really is when we stuck in that emotional loop. So in the example that I gave, that could be anxiety. Ki I'm feeling anxious कि सब सही होना चाहिए. इसलिए I'm checking and rechecking again. So when we are trying to solve an emotional problem with thinking again and again and again. Now, why does it really happen? So understand one thing, that our mind typically has one job, if you look at it, is to protect our own cells. If we look at, the caveman era also, basic instinct was of survival, right? To protect our own self. That's what the mind does. So mind always works with certainty. कि जब उसको कोई सिचुएशन मिलती है एंड वो प्रिडिक्टेबल होती है, दैट्स व्हेन इट वर्क्स द बेस्ट. Now, when we encounter any situation, जहाँ पे uncertainties होती हैं, that's when this loop actually starts. Because again, mind wants to get back to that equilibrium. कि I want to make things predictable. I want to make things, have meaning to it, add meaning to it so that it makes sense. Right. So that is when the overthinking actually starts. So, for example, we have a fight with any of our friend or our spouse or any of our family members, right? हम उस fight के बारे में, we keep thinking again and again and again for the rest of the day or maybe the whole week. Why is that? Because काफ़ी चीज़ें, see, brain always tries to make sense of what is happening. So in that effort to make sense, it tries to attribute multiple perspectives, multiple situations, multiple meanings, right? And then it wants to derive into one conclusive fact. That is, when the loop is created, when the uncertainty arises. And thinking feels like gaining control of the situation. Okay, I had a fight with my sister, for example, right? And It's just because I keep thinking of it again and again, trying to make sense. कि situation क्या थी जिस पे fight हुआ? What did she say? What did I say? What did she mean when she said that? When in reality, she must have meant what she said. As simple as that. But I try to ascribe multiple meanings to it so that it makes sense to me. Control मुझे feel हो of the situation. कुछ भी unpredictable ना happen हो जाए. That is when the emotion, this overthinking start. And notice here also, it's the emotional nature of problem solving that is taking place, right? So that is one important thing again to understand. So to give a simple analogy, mind becomes like a browser where 27 tabs are open and none of them are functioning, mostly are frozen, and I just don't know where the music is coming from, right? So that is how the mind feels when we get into that loop of overthinking. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, to understand our thoughts, overthinking समझने के लिए, first of all, it's important to understand our own thoughts, right? कि what are thoughts? See, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, this webinar, कि thoughts आते ही रहते हैं हमारे mind में. They are not in our control, right? So whenever any situation happens, anything happens, thoughts will come. We cannot stop them from coming. हम उसको जितना stop करने की कोशिश करेंगे वो उतना out of control spiral होगा. That is one essential thing to understand. But then, if thoughts are not in our control, आएंगे ही आएंगे. What's the point of having this webinar in the first place? We are talking about, managing overthinking. And usi time we are saying ki it's not in our control. What's the whole point? The point is not to control overthinking, but to manage it. Now that's the difference. Now, वो manage कैसे करना है उसको समझने के लिए we must understand the nature of our thoughts, right? So there are two primary kinds of thoughts that run in the head: positive versus negative thinking. Now, what essentially it is, बहुत simple है. Positive thinking means कि we are thinking about a problem to reach a goal, right? It is primarily solution focused. It is based on facts. It is more grounded in reality, right? Decision making may help करता है, right? So, for example, suppose one has to give a presentation, in their office. Okay. Now, there can be two approaches to this. Number one, and that person suppose has some fear of, presenting in front of people. Public speaking का थोड़ा बहुत fear है. Now, what can happen is that this situation can be handled in two different ways. One person thinks, ki, okay, I have some anxiety issues when it comes to giving presentation. So what I can do is try to find solutions. Ki, first of all, I need to break down the task into smaller parts. Ki, I need to first research on the topic, prepare the presentation. That done. Now the main problem is how to present it. Either I can practice it in front of a mirror, right? Prepare a script. And what some people really do, and which is helpful, is that I can imagine that there are not people sitting in the room or the area, but some objects, so that it doesn't fear me, right? What another person can do in that situation is that they start fretting over this. Whenever they are given the task, in that very moment, you know, they start feeling anxious. And then a lot of what ifs comes into the head. What if I mess this up? What if, I leave out some important part during my research, my R&D? What if my presentation is not right? What if? Now, understand the difference between the two. One is grounded in reality, the other is more assumptuous in nature. The overthinking part actually consists of this negative, unhelpful loop of what if, right? So, in the case when we send the email, in the case when we have any, conflict or argument with any of our loved ones, in the case when we have to present something in front of an audience. So in some cases, may overthinking actually begins here, which keeps us removed from the reality. वो एविडेंस बेस्ड नहीं होता. हम व्हाट इफ तो सोचते हैं कि व्हाट इफ आई फंबल, व्हाट इफ पीपल टेक my presentation negatively, what if they are critical, but where is the evidence that this will happen, right? So that is when we get stuck in the overthinking loop. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, another aspect to understand our thoughts is the TFA loop, which I believe some of you at least must have heard about it, even if you're from the non psychology background, because of all the social media presence and everything, right? So, TFA loop is basically the thought feeling action. जो हमारे thoughts होते हैं, they affect our feelings, right? And जैसा हम feel करते हैं, वैसा हम act करते हैं. For example, we were working in our office and suddenly, the manager comes and blasts off on some other team. वो हम पे गुस्सा भी नहीं किए. But manager comes and blasts off on some other team itself, right? And we are witnessing it. And some thoughts come to our mind ki, okay, the manager does not look to be in a good mood. Maybe something is wrong. We start feeling anxiety, right? What if, I do something and that, just irks up the manager more. कि मैं कहीं ऐसा कुछ ना कर दूं जिससे मैनेजर परेशान हो जाए. ये थॉट आया दिमाग में. उससे एंजाइटी होनी स्टार्ट हुई दैट ओ नो आई मस्ट जस्ट डू माय टास्क राइट एटलीस्ट फॉर टुडे. आई कीप बिकॉज वो एंजाइटी आई फील कंपेल्ड टू चेक एंड रीचेक माय वर्क. I feel hesitated in approaching my manager for today. तो वो मेरे actions में भी reflect हुआ. जबकि my manager did not scold me, right? It was in some another team itself. But because ऐसे thoughts मेरे दिमाग में आए, उससे I started feeling anxious, तो वो मेरे behavior में भी reflect हुआ, right? And that is why, understanding this overthinking and managing overthinking is important. Because we believe our thoughts. We are wired to do that. That's why thoughts are important to us. कि जो भी thoughts आते हैं हम उसको believe करते हैं and उसी को अपनी reality बनाते हैं. So that is why to have your thoughts grounded in reality is of utmost importance. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, we move on to the essential parts of the overthinking management. Very first thing, that we should not do when we find ourselves stuck in the loop of overthinking is to try to control or suppress it. As I said, as I have kept saying, कि thoughts हमारे control में नहीं होते, right? So we should not try to control them or suppress them at all. So I'll give an example. So Prajita, I'll ask you to not think of a pink elephant. What was the first thought that came in mind? It was a picture of a pink elephant.
Pink elephant. Yeah.
है ना? So हम जितना अपने mind को बोल, but I told you to not think about it, right? So I did not ask you to think about a pink elephant. तो हम जितना किसी भी particular thought से दूर भागने की कोशिश करेंगे, उसको control करने की कोशिश करेंगे, it will keep coming back at us, right? So we should always avoid thought suppression, forcing positivity. Now, this is important. कि our mind works to protect us, right? तो कभी कभी वो कुछ scenario situation बना रहा होता है. Again, it is to protect us. And not all negative thinking is wrong. Sometimes it is preparing us for the worst, right? कि worst case scenario अगर कुछ होता है तो हमारे पास उससे डील करने के भी resources होने चाहिए. So not all negative thinking is bad. So we should not force positivity upon such thoughts. Now, distracting aggressively. कि कोई भी, the moment we start realize कि okay, we are overthinking. तो बहुत diligently, distract करने की कोशिश नहीं करनी चाहिए. Again, the pink elephant example. Now, reassurance seeking is another thing, you know. So, for example, email wala example, if we pick up again. So, what we tend to do is ki, acha, I noticed that I'm going into overthinking. Let me just ask somebody ki, have I done this right? ये email एक बार please cross check कर लो. जा चुका है email, right? अब उसका कुछ हो नहीं सकता. But still I ask my colleague, या please एक बार इसको cross check कर लो. कुछ mistake तो नहीं दिख रही, right? So that assurance seeking also should be avoided. Googling symptoms or outcomes. Now, one of the favorite hobbies that I find in so many of my patients. कि कोई भी minor inconvenience होती है and then they feel a certain way, they start googling or worse chat GPTing with, right? कि उसमें AI में डाल के देखते हैं कि what are the problems. Now, these platforms give you the solution based on what you have put the info out there. It does not know the context, your individual context. And that creates a big difference. So that's why Googling and using any AI platform should be avoided in such situations. Now, can we have the next slide, please? What to actually do then? अभी तक हमने बोला कि थॉट को कंट्रोल नहीं करना, सप्रेस नहीं करना, डिस्ट्रैक्ट नहीं करना, तो करना क्या है ओवर थिंकिंग मैनेज करने के लिए? So there are a few techniques which are scientifically backed, evidence based, grounded, that can help us manage the overthinking. Understand, manage, not control, right? So first one is thought labeling. Now, what it is, we create distance from our thoughts by naming it. So, for instance, if we take the example of the manager situation when the manager was scolding some another team, वहाँ पे when we start feeling anxious, so we tell ourselves कि I am having a thought that my manager might scold me also. This is a very good way to ground yourself in the reality. तब हम अगर ना understand the difference between the two statements, one is कि my manager will scold me also, I should do this correctly. The other statement is I am having a thought that my manager might scold me, right? So, Aprajita, maybe can you tell the difference between the two?
So one is like ki where my mind is convinced that this is gonna happen, and another is like there is a possibility. So differentiating between, what is happening and what is possible to happen.
Perfect, right? So, this is exactly what we are doing when we are labeling a thought. राइट कि हम एक पॉसिबिलिटी क्रिएट कर रहे हैं वर्सेस हम श्योर हैं कि दिस इज बाउंड टू हैपन. सो व्हेन वी लेबल अ थॉट कि आई हैव अ थॉट दैट दिस माइट हैपन, that instant we are creating a distance, between the should statement, the assumptive thought, right? Now, evidence based thinking, that is your challenge ki what is the probability that whatever I'm thinking is actually true, right? So if we take the example again of the manager situation, ki what is the possibility that my manager will lash out at me as well? हो सकता है ना कि उस टीम ने genuinely कुछ major faulty कुछ किया हो जिसकी वजह से they got reprimanded, right? And me, on the other hand, I know if I'm doing my work correctly, तो he might not lash out at me. हो सकता है कि थोड़े से फोल मूड में रहे, बट मुझे डांटे ऐसा तो जरूरी नहीं ना, right? Of course, now, that being said, you won't just, bulldoze yourself into the manager's office and ask for his reviews and everything. When you know that he's not in a good mood currently, you'll give him or her some time to calm down, right? So, again, evidence based thinking. कि इस चीज का कोई evidence नहीं है. Now, if we take the example of argument with my sister, मेरे पास इस चीज का evidence नहीं है ना that she meant harm, or an argument with a friend. Even if she said it, something that I'm assuming she must have meant it that way, in a different way. तो उसका क्या evidence है मेरे पास, right? So that way is again we are grounding ourselves in reality. Now context भी समझना फिर important हो जाता है when it comes to evidence thinking कि again कि हो सकता है कि as I said कि my sister or my friend must have been in a bad mood. Maybe उनका काम पे दिन अच्छा ना गया हो, right? And maybe she must have been stressed. So this one incident happened in a particular way. But then I must compare it with, her the remaining time. That she's good with me. She is my sister. She is my best friend. Right? I know she doesn't mean any harm. तो वहीं पे we just stop our trail of thoughts, right? Next slide, please. Then is the grounding. So when we understand ना, अब हमने समझ लिया कि ठीक है थॉट लेबलिंग भी कर सकते हैं, हम एविडेंस बेस्ड थिंकिंग भी कर सकते हैं, but that is not essentially stopping the loop that is going on, है ना? What is तो तब भी आएंगे ही. It is practically not possible when we say कि okay I have this thought, that I might be doing wrong or something like that. Now that will not actually stop the loop, right? Again, when we find कि overthinking is getting too out of hand, you know, एकदम brain की wires में से धुआं उठने लग रहा है. So what we do is essentially कि we try grounding, relaxing techniques basically, right? We reset our mind. Now, what is grounding? It's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, which is a sensory reset for the mind. यहाँ पे you just, sit back comfortably, सब काम छोड़ के, take a deep calming breath and just name 5 things you see, 4 things that you can touch. So, for example, it could be the table, your pencil, and just feel how it is feeling in your hand. So, table ka texture smooth hai. Pencil ka thoda wooden sa hai, around the lead part, it might be a little rough because of the wood. And maybe your clothes, ki fabric ka texture kaisa hai? How is it feeling in your hands, right? 3 things that you hear around you. Could be the traffic, could be the people talking, could be anything, right? And then just notice ki whether the sound is loud, is it toned, is it mellowed, right? Agar kuch background music hai, to what kind of a music it is. 2 things that you can smell around you. It could be anything, maybe a perfume or even a sanitizer bottle for that matter. कि just see कि उसका fragrance या smell कैसा है. Perfume का कैसा है, whether it is fruity, floral, you know, how does the sanitizer smell, pungent, या फिर if it's a scented one, तो उसका scent कैसा है. Things like that. One thing that you can taste in that very moment, it could be as simple as water. Okay, when you're sipping the water, water ka temperature kaisa hai when you're taking it in your mouth, how does it, the texture, how does it feel? So ये sensory grounding होती है. सुनने में थोड़ा सा weird लगता है because I have had patients who tell me कि this sounds weird, doing it. But then when they actually practice in the session with me, it is very powerful, in grounding anybody to their present. This is the case even with the people who feel too stressed in a moment, in particular moment, या जब बहुत तेज गुस्सा आ रहा होता है, right? When they do this grounding, it immediately calms them down. So it is a very powerful tool. Now then is the parking lot technique. What we are actually doing is जैसा मैंने बताया था कि हम किसी भी थॉट को स्टॉप नहीं कर सकते, डिस्ट्रैक्ट भी नहीं कर सकते. बट एसेंशियली वी कैन वन मस्ट माइट थिंक कि अगर हम किसी थॉट से खुद को डिस्ट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं तो वो ग्राउंडिंग के थ्रू डिस्ट्रैक्शन ही तो हुई ना. एंड आई हैव सेड प्रीवियसली कि वी डू नॉट डिस्ट्रैक्ट. सो व्हाट वी आर एसेंशियली डूइंग इज कि क्या करना है, take a mental pause and just write down whatever is troubling us, whatever thought is troubling us. ठीक है, जिस लूप से हम बाहर नहीं आ पा रहे उसको लिख लेंगे and I'll just allot it some time कि okay, right now is not the time for me to think about this. Maybe at a later time when I'm much calmer, then I'll get back to this thought again. Then maybe I can do, the evidence-based thinking or the thought labeling, right? So हमने उसमें टाइम अलॉट कर दिया, उसको इग्नोर नहीं किया, उसको सप्रेस नहीं किया. So that also calms our mind down. Ki, okay, I'm not running away from the problem or the situation, but I'm giving it a particular time, place, of when I'll deal with it. Say, for example, जब हम ऑफिस में होते हैं, things are very hectic, of course, some days. And उस time पे अगर if we notice ourselves going into any, overthinking spiral, right? Or maybe before a presentation, उस time हमारे पास time नहीं होता to, dwell on all the thoughts that are running on loop. And maybe उस time पे हम thought labeling का, या फिर evidence based thinking का time actually नहीं होता. So then what we can do is we park the thought in the lot of our mind. Then I'll come back to you at a later time. But right now I'll just focus on what is important, right? So next, please. Then is the progressive muscle relaxation. Please. Yeah. So next is the progressive muscle relaxation. It is again, like the sensory reset. So what we basically do is we tense and relax our voluntary group of muscles. So what we do is, for example, we take our fists and then we clench it so hard, that we feel all the tension, all the worry, all the stress coming into the fists. And we clench it hard and feel the discomfort. And then slowly we release our palms, fingers, and then feel the blood flow coming again into our palms. And that sensation is then relaxing. So, for the people who find grounding a little tricky, a little difficult, this can be one way to do it, right? Then is the paced breathing. So, what it is essentially is again a very powerful mental reset technique where we inhale slowly. We again sit back on wherever we are sitting, or maybe lie down if that's possible. And then we just relax, loosen up our body, and then inhale slowly for 4 seconds, right? And then exhale from mouth for 6 seconds. So by doing this, what we are doing is giving a signal to our brain कि we are not in a do or die situation right now. जितना rapidly brain, thoughts पे work कर रहा होता है, जितना rapidly उसके पीछे दौड़ रहा होता है, like hamster on a wheel. So we are giving it a signal to just calm down, relax, buddy. कुछ इतना survival पे बात नहीं है. We can take it later on, right? So we're giving it that signal. Now, next one, please. So basically, this is something, interactive segment where we could have just taken up one of the relaxing technique, of the reset technique. And then I just want to maybe show you, right? So if we take the grounding or the paced breathing, let's just take paced breathing, right? So Aprajita, can you do it with me, right?
Yes.
ठीक है.
Yes.
Perfect. So let's just sit back on our chairs, right? Relax yourself, loosen up your body, right? And just focus on your breathing. Close your eyes. Just focus how the breath is going in and out. And tell yourself right now, I'm perfectly relaxed and calm, and there is nothing to worry. Now I want you to slowly inhale deeply for 4 seconds and exhale from your mouth for 6 seconds. Lovely. Can you do it one more time with me? Perfect. How do you feel, Prajita, right now?
Yeah, it's very refreshing. I mean, mm, most of the time, like it's a very involuntary action, the breathing. So we do not really pay
Hmm.
attention. But yeah, it's a great tool, like to bring everything together, like all your thoughts here. So yeah, I do feel relaxed.
Right? So, so a lot of my patients also, who are going from a lot of stress or any distressing situation. So whenever they say that when they are in the middle of any conflict and when they try the spaced breathing, it actually, makes them a little calmer. You know, if suppose if there is a patient of anger management, for them also it works really, really well, right? So, moving on, can we have the next slide? Yeah. So basically, that was all about, this overthinking, what it is, how to manage, essential differences, manage versus control. Why does it happen? What to do and what not to do in situations when we are overthinking, right? So, uh, just think about it. Ki, what would my mind feel like if it wasn't that heavy? If, all the time, all these 27 tabs were not open, if it wasn't running at a hamster's pace, hamster running in a wheel, तो कैसा feel होगा मेरा mind, right? Essential thing to understand is कि the goal is not to silence the mind, but to understand it, work with it. Again, as I said, कि उसका primary goal is not to harm us, but to protect us. And kabhi kabhi the mind works so aggressively to do that that it actually ends up doing the opposite, create distress, right? And a very important thing is कि ओवरथिंकिंग जो होती है उससे डिस्ट्रेस होता है कभी कभी इट्स अ वेरी टिप ऑफ द आइसबर्ग टू से कि ओके आई ओवरथिंक अ लॉट right but to understand why do I do this in the first place, why is it essential for me to create multiple scenarios and take things in control जबकि हमें पता है कि वी कैन नॉट कंट्रोल आवर एक्सटर्नल एनवायरनमेंट हमें पता है हम किसी और का बिहेवियर नहीं कंट्रोल कर सकते हम सिचुएशन एनवायरनमेंट कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते बट स्टिल इफ देयर इज दैट नीड टू फाइंड कंट्रोल सो it must be the surface level problem that we are seeing and deep down कुछ और core issues हो सकते हैं, right? And in those cases, it is perfectly all right to seek help. Now, that being said, zaruri nahi ki you take a professional help all the time. It could be through a friend, close family member, जिसके साथ you can discuss your problems. And sometimes उनसे भी बात करके काफी ऐसे solution मिल जाता है कि why it is the way it is, right? And if in some situations, tabhi you don't feel satisfied कि I am not finding the solution to my problem, then taking a professional help is perfectly all right. Coming to therapy, going to a psychologist does not mean that something is wrong with me. It just simply means that I am trying to understand myself better, राइट कि अब फॉर एग्जाम्पल पैर टूटता है तो हम डॉक्टर के पास जाते हैं ना हड्डी टूटती है तो हम ऑर्थो के पास जाते हैं है ना तब हम ये थोड़ी सोचते हैं कि यार मेरा तो टांग टूट गई मैं मुझ में कुछ कमी है राइट वी सी अ प्रॉब्लम वी गो टू द ऑर्थो टू फिक्स दैट प्रॉब्लम दैट डजंट मीन कि समथिंग इज लैकिंग इन मी राइट सो दैट शिफ्ट इन मेंटालिटी इज एसेंशियल. So when we are going into therapy, we are actually taking a step forward to become a more empowered version of ourselves, right? So can we have the next slide, please? So again, if there is a thought circling Maybe Aprajita, if you want to ask any questions about anything right now, you can go ahead, right? Anything that you would want to discuss, that will also would be welcomed.
Yeah, so like firstly, thank you so much for talking about just not what overthinking is, how it happens, but at the same time giving us a very practical tool to manage it because you're very right. We cannot stop our thinking. It will be there. So related to that only, I wanted to know like how do I like how do I identify that what I am thinking is overthinking or it is required? Or
Hmm.
like sometimes it does feel like it's very difficult to identify that this has become a problem, or if we do not want to label a problem, but something which is affecting me or my daily life. So how do I
Hmm.
identify that?
That's a very essential and important question, Aprajita. Something, that I really actually wanted you to ask, right? So basically what happens is कि how to identify, right? कि मैं overthinking कर रही हूँ या कर रहा हूँ या फिर I'm actually doing some good solution focused logical thinking, right? The main difference is कि जो हम normal tactful thinking कर रहे होंगे वो हमेशा solution based रहेगा, right? कि we are trying to find a solution, not assuming, but factual based. ठीक है जहाँ पे we notice the shift going from fact based to what ifs, assumptive statements, वहाँ we know कि we are going into the loop of overthinking. As I said initially, कि जब हमारी thought process becomes emotional in nature, then there are tendencies for us to go into that loop of overthinking. That is the essential difference. राइट अब जैसे अगर हम वो मैनेजर वाला एग्जांपल लें राइट हमें पता है कि द मैनेजर इज नॉट इन अ गुड मूड राइट नाउ ठीक है अब उसमें अगर हम ये सोचें कि he might blast off at me so it is a very logical thought right but having the assurity कि he will lash out on me as well right उसका evidence नहीं है it's not fact based. Now understand a situation में if we think in the way कि he's or she is not in a good mood right now. So ठीक है I will और मुझे उनसे actually कुछ काम है. I want him to review whatever work I've been doing. Right? So I might not approach him or her right now, but maybe give them some time, to मतलब 15-20 minutes, 1 घंटा, whatever feels best in that situation, in that moment, to give the person some time, to cool off. And then go and ask them for the review or whatever work we have with them, whatever discussion we want to do with them. Right. Now, the other person on the other hand, now this is very practical thinking. Overthinking, on the other hand, would make a person feel very anxious. Ki I will have to recheck my work again and again, would self doubt their own selves. Ki because my manager, scolded some other team, तो high chances वो मुझ पे भी blast out करेंगे, which might be a possibility, true, right? But then ऐसा जरूरी नहीं कि वो करेंगे ही करेंगे. That is the basic difference. When I'll start rechecking my work, it'll get more emotional in nature. I'll let, anxiety guide my actions, right? So, in that sense, that is the essential difference. I hope that
Thank you so
question
much.
answers the question.
Yes, yes, it does. It does. That the moment, like, I start ignoring the facts and start assuming situation, this is the where I need to stop. And
Hmm.
following up with the same question, there is another, not a question, but just um kind of like, because in because of social media and also people talking about it, which I feel it's a great thing that, okay, now people at least are talking about it and understanding that overthinking can be a problem. But at the same time, we hear with like almost with every, like, you also being as a psychologist, you must be hearing it from almost from all your client that I overthink a lot, I'm a overthinking, I feel a lot. So what would you like to tell them, people who are still not in therapy or maybe not comfortable enough to go for therapy? So, like, if one thing you can let them know, that what if they are not alone, and anything which you feel like to share with them.
Right. So, one basic difference, first of all, and very important one that I would want to point out is that overthinking is a pattern, right? It's not a personality. So, I hear this language कि I'm an overthinker. तो आप वो अपनी आइडेंटिटी बना रहे हो कि मैं ऐसी ही हूँ, मैं ऐसा ही हूँ कि आई ओवर थिंक अ लॉट, यू आर नॉर्मलाइजिंग इट, राइट? एंड ऑल्दो इट इज अ गुड थिंग कि सोशल मीडिया पे आजकल मेंटल हेल्थ की काफी अवेयरनेस है, बट एट द सेम टाइम काफी नेगेटिव नॉइज भी है, राइट? So we have to take everything with a little bit of pinch of salt as well. Cannot believe everything. It's not, you know, a voguish thing to be an overthinker. How can it be a cool thing to be an overthinker when it is giving you distress? Right? तो कभी कभी I see surprisingly, specifically जो young adults आते हैं around the age of 20 and the adolescents की, they very almost with a tone of pride they say that I am an overthinker, and I tend to overthink a lot of things. But then what they're doing is confusing the normal thought process with overthinking, right? And now, again, then coming back to your question that, what to tell anybody if they are actually into this habit of overthinking is to understand one thing that your mind is not your enemy. Okay? It is always trying to protect you. तो उस प्रोटेक्शन के वजह से it is creating assumptions, trying to make things in control. ठीक है, ये दो चीजें समझनी इंपॉर्टेंट है कि माइंड इज नॉट द एनिमी, and what it is doing is to take control of the situation that you actually cannot handle, you cannot like take control of. But what you can actually control is your own self, right? How you act, how you respond, how you react to any situation. बस वही हम कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं, और हम इसके अलावा कुछ नहीं कंट्रोल कर सकते. सो द मोमेंट ये दो चीजें सेटल होती है ना माइंड में कि, so interestingly, when people come to me with symptoms of anxiety or depression also, I often tell them ki one cheese that they have to understand is ki anxiety is not the enemy. It is trying to tell you something that needs your attention, which you have been ignoring, right? So it is just trying to bring your focus to some wound that you maybe cannot see or have been ignoring it on purpose. तभी वो एंजाइटी आती है. सो एंजाइटी, ओवर थिंकिंग या जो भी कंसर्न्स होते हैं, हमारे एलिमेंट्स होते हैं, दे आर नॉट द एनिमी. Of course, I'm talking about the general symptoms out there, not the specific severe clinical ones, right? जो ऐसे छोटी छोटी चीजें होती हैं, छोटे छोटे डिस्ट्रेस होते हैं, mind is never the enemy. So instead of fighting it, we have to understand it. So that is maybe one thing that I tell my patients also, and maybe to everyone, who does it also. So I think that again, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And thank you so much for explaining that. And yeah, so that's it from my end. Like, these are two questions which were asked, and I also wanted to personally discuss about it. So thank you for answering that.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And so maybe we can just see the last slide.
Mhm.
Yeah, so again, this is something, my handle basically. So I put up in New Delhi in Punjabi Bagh, and I take both online and offline sessions. So if in case anybody would want to reach out even if it's not for therapy, but to discuss anything upon this particular topic as well. I would love to have a discussion over it, or anything in general if it's related to mental health. Any questions, anything, people can just reach out to me on my mail. That's my WhatsApp number as well. So they can reach out to me without any hesitation, and I would love to have any discussion or clear out any of the doubts that they have. So even if they do not want therapy, this want clarity on certain aspects, I would love to do that. And of course, they're always welcome at my space for the therapy as well. And thank you so much, Aprajita. Now, this brings us to the end of the webinar. And really, really grateful for you to reach out to me and give me a platform to discuss about something that is very trivial yet very distressing at the same time, right? So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ayushi, for being here and also providing this very gentle and safe space to talk about overthinking or share and also sharing the tools with us. It means a lot to us and to people who are watching us. And like Ayushi said, that if you just want to have a conversation or even want to take therapy session, of course you can reach out to her. I can vouch for it. She is the one of the most polite, gentle, and nice person to talk with. So you can always reach out to us in our when we post this on our YouTube. We will be putting her description. We will putting the links in the description, so you may reach out to her from there, or you can also reach out to me, and I can share her contacts with you. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining in on Sunday afternoon. It's lovely to have everybody here, and again, thank you, Ayushi, for this wonderful presentation. And we'll see you
Thank you
next
so
Sunday.
much.
Every Sunday we have this webinar at the same time. So we'll see you next Sunday. By that time, thank you so much for being here and take care. Thank you, Ayushi. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Bye
You
bye.
too. Bye bye.